So with this reading, this hybrid meeting of the Jefferson-Madison Regional Library Board is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Albemarle County's Ordinance number 20-A, subsection 16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster.
Very nice.
Thank you. And so we will begin with our call to order and the confirmation of, we just did that. And now we have our technology plan draft. And that's what we're going to discuss next. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Did you want to, let's do the intros. You want to do introductions?
Oh, I do want to do introductions because I don't know everybody. Hi, my name is Lisa Woolfork. My pronouns are she and her, and I represent the city of Charlottesville here at the Library Board of Trustees. And Ken, I'm just going to call around. How about Susan? Hi, Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Huffman, and I'm the branch manager at Nelson Memorial Library.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Hello, Kayla.
Hi, I'm Kayla Payne. I'm the Collections and Technology Manager.
Excellent. Thank you. Krista.
Hi, I'm Krista Farrell, and I'm the Central Library Branch Manager and the Assistant Library Director.
Excellent. Pro.
Yeah.
Hartwell.
Hi, I'm Pro. I'm the current president of the board of the Friends of the Jefferson-Madison Regional Library. So, yay!
I'm surprised you don't have a crown. Did David not talk to you about that?
Clearly, I did.
Like a crown for the president of the Friends. Well, David, we'll continue that conversation. Meredith, next, please.
Meredith Dickens, I'm the collection manager.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you. AJ.
Hi, I'm AJ Mosley. I'm the business manager.
Welcome. Thank you. Tony.
Hey, I'm Tony Townsend, and I'm one of 3 Albemarle County trustees on the Jefferson-Madison Regional Board.
And Thomas.
Hi, I'm Thomas Unsworth. I'm another one of the Albemarle representatives on the board.
And you're the board chair, right?
And I am, yes, for another month or so.
People like being so humble. Like,
I'm sorry.
I'm just the president of the Friends of the Library, which does this amazing sale and gives the library so much money, and it's just amazing. Like, say more. Say more.
Happily down here in my corner in Scottsville.
All right, excellent, excellent. Is there anybody else on the call that that I should recognize? Other folks in the room with you, David?
Yeah, we've got 4 in the room here, and why don't I let Evan start and we'll move around.
My name is Evan Stankovics. I'm the supervising reference librarian at the Northside Library.
Natasha Richards, I'm the Northside Library circulation supervisor.
Hi, I'm the other Meredith Cole. I'm a trustee for the city of Charlottesville.
And David Plunkett, library director for Jmrl. And the news that I have is that Evan is stepping off of the 5-year plan committee, and he agreed to come here to help transition Northside's seat over to Latasha. So we get both of them for one meeting. After that, we get Latasha, who is amazing and also has experience with strategic planning. So we're very excited about that.
Well, thank you very much for your service. Thank you. And so, okay, so we have our introductions, and now we can turn to the goal 2 of the technology draft plan.
Yes, and I'm going to screen share for that, Lisa, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll give a little background here. So this is coming to the Strategic Plan Committee from the board's Technology Committee. And for a little context, let me show you, I should have prepped this already, but let me show you the current status of the technology plan that's part of the 5-year plan. So all public libraries in the state of Virginia are required to have a 5-year plan. So Latasha, it can't just be a strategic plan, it has to be a Stalinesque 5-year plan by state code. So one of the things that Jmrl has tried to do is work a technology plan into every strategic plan, but recognizing that technology can move a little bit quicker than the rest of the world, we try to do 2 within each 5-year plan.
Okay.
So here's the current 5-year plan that was adopted to begin in July of 2019. And the technology goal is to improve infrastructure and expand technology-related services in order to provide high-quality digital technological resources that the community needs for school, work, and life. And the goal just says basically, see the appendixes at the end of the 5-year plan. And there are 2 appendixes, one for the first 3 years and one for the second 3 years. So there was kind of plan A with all this stuff here, appendix A, and then there was some anecdotal, the board saw this last year, kind of here's what we've done, here's what was accomplished in that goal, here's what the future looks like for technology in the next 3 years. And then there was the appendix B, which is 3 years worth of technology planning. So the board technology committee has been talking about this for a while now, and really feels that what we have done there is created a staff document that we've codified as a board document. The board goal is to set priority and direction, and it's the staff goal to implement that. So those 2 appendixes that we have are very minute, like we're going to buy this thing and plug it in there type detail. But what the technology committee decided was that we needed a broader view from the board, and that the important details that were inside those appendixes could come out. Kayla and her staff could keep those as a staff working plan, basically. So they worked on this new technology goal. So this would replace the one that just says see the appendixes. And with it, there are 6 broader objectives for the library board. All right, so the goal is the same, the overarching information. And then the objectives are much broader than they were in the appendixes. And this got worked over, proposed by the staff technology advisory committee, and then reviewed by the board technology committee. Both of those 2 went back with revisions and now are presenting this to the strategic plan committee. So if we like this, we will take it back to the full board and say, hey, we'd like to amend the 5-year plan to include this change, basically. Okay, and so I am gonna, I hate to do this to you all, but I'm going to read them so that everybody's on the same page here. There's 6 objectives. First one says by the end of 23, Jmrl will improve IT infrastructure and raise cybersecurity awareness among staff. And then we put in some priorities to kind of talk about, well, how's that gonna happen? Manage credentialing and a comprehensive technology assessment of hardware and software. 2 was by the end of fiscal year 24. So the end of 23 is June, the end of June of 2023. The end of 24 is the end of June of 2024. Jmrl will evaluate the current public computing setup and provide a formal recommendation for the future and total number of public PCs available in the library. Potential proposals could include desktop virtualization. So that's a task that the staff will look at whether or not that's a possibility by that time. And then the rest of these are ongoing objectives, really. The IT department will support continuing ed and staff training needs. Consideration will be given to incorporating virtual training platform with video storage options. That's something we're working on now. The IT department will support programming initiatives of library staff. These could include digitization services, augmented and virtual reality programming, and assisting patron content creation with technology-driven services. Number 5 is the IT department will explore improvements to branch facility, phone, and networking infrastructures. Expanded wireless, secure after-hours hold lockers, and book vending machines are some ideas to increase access to library services. And the last one is digital services will update Jmrl's digital presence and offer new technological services for the community. This includes launching a complete website redesign, reflecting the guidance of Jmrl Website Policy 4.8, establishing a digital branch, improving the mobile user experience. So, Kayla, anything to add to, anything to say about the process or anything to add for this group to consider?
No, other than thank you to the staff and board members who participated. I think this will be a very good addition to the 5-year plan, if agreed upon by the board.
I also really like how they pulled out materials from the appendix, which to me seems as though this developed very organically about things that we thought made sense comprehensively. And it's a nice way to kind of have goals that allow us to move forward to something, but it's not like it's coming necessarily from without, right? Like it's just something that we think that we need and have goals we want to move along on, but also we can add or change as new information or whatever comes about.
Are there any kind of wordsmithing suggestions from anyone before we talk about whether or not we would be ready to make a recommendation that the full board make this part of our strategic plan. It has been poured over quite a bit, but these are fresh eyes. So.
Well, could we get into a small discussion of managed credentialing?
Yeah.
And what we think that'll involve?
Yeah, I think that we're looking, Tony, at if not an Active Directory environment, it would be a pseudo Active Directory environment, basically. Currently, we do not have that. And I think largely we're talking about for staff here, right, Kayla?
Yeah, for staff, logging into staff computers.
So right now, Jmrl machines are standalone machines. If I walk up to a computer here, the login is for the staff that are sharing that computer. It'll be like the Northside Library login. And the way of the world is people log in using individual credentials, which is it's a security thing basically, so that they can protect their own data and they can keep things kind of firewalled between each other. So we've talked about this for a long time. It's an expensive proposition to move to actually Active Directory, and it may be overkill for what we need, but Kayla and the IT team are looking at some other possibilities of like cloud-based softwares that would interact with our Google Drive. So everybody has an account. I've got a dplunkett@jmrl.org account, all the trustees have accounts, and it would involve setting something up where you could get a personalized desktop based on your Google credentials, basically.
Good, thank you.
I just had a couple of questions, and these are not questions in reference to the proposal itself. It's just more clarification about things I just didn't understand. So what is desktop virtualization? What does that mean? From objective 2, potential proposals could include desktop virtualization.
So that is something that the IT department has considered, where for the public computers, it would be a little device kind of that could be on the back of a monitor that is basically standard for all the computers. So all the computers would be it's sort of like almost like a cloud. Maybe I'm not explaining this correctly. Like sort of a cloud.
Basically going back to it's like digging back in time in some ways, right?
Right.
It's like going back to like a mainframe setup, right? Where there's a machine that serves out content. So your desktop doesn't have to have a CPU and to be its own processing computing thing. It just needs to be able to receive the processing and computing from, Kayla, I don't know what it's from a server, I guess.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so there would be basically a server perhaps at each branch, and something that's called a thin client or zero client receiver is on the back of the monitor, and it basically points to that server and gets a clean session every time.
Okay.
Lisa, are you familiar with the Hive at UVA that the students use to get on remotely? I mean, after we had public labs, remember we got rid of all the public labs 10 years ago or so.
Right.
And now this is virtual environment. It used to be called the Hive, and I don't even remember what it's called now.
Okay.
It's the same idea.
Okay, great. I think I understand, but here's the thing. I don't have to know everything.
Oh, come on.
This is why.
Sure you do.
This is why we have experts and why I'm on a board with other people who know a lot about things that I know a little about. So y'all get it? You like it? I love it. Okay.
One of the goals, Lisa, for that particularly that we've talked about in the past is to break out of a cycle of needing to buy so much replacement hardware every year. We need to buy, especially with the shortage. We've been talking about the chip shortage and things like that.
Oh, right.
You can get one machine that will push them out to these like dummy terminals rather than needing 30 machines.
Okay, excellent. Love it, love it. And then my other question was about objective number 6, establishing a digital branch. That sounds very exciting. I don't know what that means, but it sounds exciting. And I'd like to know like just a little bit more about what that is.
So with the digital branch, that's sort of like, we have a lot of users now who are using our ebooks and other digital resources. So treating the website as its own branch in a sense. And our digital services coordinator, Sarah, was working on that with the launch of the new website.
Okay,
And David, whatever other thoughts you have on that.
great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's basically saying, here's all the digital resources that we offer, and the way to think about it is that this is your online library. So the same types of things, you know, that here at Northside, they think about all the services that are offered here under one roof. It would be a way to codify for the public. Here are all the services that are offered digitally at Jmrl, basically. It's the Jmrl digital branch.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are my only questions. I think that the language and all of this looks great to me. I just was, those are the spots I was just like, just a little confused, but I appreciate the clarification.
I think I got a little hung up on virtual reality programming.
Yeah.
It felt a little dated to me, but then I sort of had to go back, and I think you're doing a really nice job, which the objective is very clear and concise. And then the next thing is sort of, it may be this, it could be this.
Here's some
And
things we might do.
so I'm not really objecting to the virtual reality program. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't sound like something's gonna happen in the next 3 years, but
Which one is that?
it's number 4.
So I had
Or-
one question, where we talk about assisting patrons with content creation with technology-driven services. Is that going to require additional staff, do we think?
I think part of that could be with, so we are hiring for a supervising technology services librarian, and that is Stella Poole's replacement. And her position over the years, what she had been doing has changed, or what we're envisioning sort of a different picture for what that, in particular, the Monticello Avenue lab might do. And that's one thing I think we have that as an idea for the patron content creation. With the digital media lab.
If you all had somebody, I could totally imagine, like, I think, you know, considering the way that content, which has become a word that I absolutely hate. I absolutely hate that word, because everything has now been reduced to content. But I can imagine somebody thinking about this, something that librarians already do every day, right? When you go in to get advice on writing your paper, the librarian helps you find additional research, which some people now call content. So you can write your paper, which some people now also call content, and create your art, which some people also now call content. Let us all join in the hatred of that word. And so, but if you all did something, I could totally see something like a workshop in making reels for Instagram, or 30-second short form videos, or all of this stuff. Like, I know people would pay for that. I am a people. I am she, me, her. I am people. So
I think, Lisa, to answer Tony's question, there had been no discussion about needing another position or more hours anywhere for that specific goal.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a reason not to do it. I was curious. I know that, again, at UVA and Clemens, when the Teaching Resource Center, and a lot of folks that help the patrons with content creation, patrons being the students and faculty, some of them have extra folks and some of them don't. So,
Yeah, Kayla hit the nail on the head. Like, this is part of the vision for the digital media lab that Monticello Avenue will be turning into in the years to come.
And just one thing to add, like, as we were sort of crafting some of these objectives, we sorted the individual staff level goals. And one of those on kind of our staff plan is explore hosting a platform for local writers and media creators. So that was one of the ones that we pull out of those staff goals to craft the larger objectives. And that was one we felt would encompass all the types of content that the library could support.
mm-hmm.
Were you going to say something, Meredith C?
No, I just said it's under, this may include, so
Yeah.
I don't really have an objection, because we're not saying our staff that's already overworked or whatever is going to have to do the following thing. If any person who comes into the library, they're now going to have to help them create content and drop everything. So I don't have any objection. I think it's an interesting idea to talk about how this new position could do new and different things for people, and what are people asking.
Right. What are the needs?
What are the needs.
Are you okay with leaving the virtual reality, or did you want to?
Yeah, I'm okay with it, as I said, as long as you don't come back to the next budget.
You're like, we need a virtual reality building.
Ayla needs
in Second Life
to wear around around the library. I think those make people sick. I think that's what they discovered.
I can totally imagine somebody like reading this and going, finally, I'm going to get that TikTok tutorial I've been looking for.
As long as I don't have to do the TikTok tutorial. I can only do the
mandatory
dances.
training for all Jmrl staff on TikTok.
Okay, do we think that there, it sounds like maybe there's a consensus that this group is ready to move on from this and say, yeah, we would recommend this to the full board as the replacement. And then it would come with the stamp of the technology committee and the 5-year plan committee, and the full board can then go through this process again for the third time to see what needs to change.
I would say yes.
I agree. I agree. Do I need to call for a vote, or do we just?
No, the committee will only make recommendations. So if we have a consensus, if there's nobody that has an objection or anything that we particularly be looking at or changing, then we can just, at the next board meeting, you can say we're recommending that the board adopt this.
Great.
Okay.
Really good.
Okay. Shall we move on to your next agenda item?
Yes, our next agenda item is the annual review of the Jmrl strategic plan.
Okay.
Sounds small.
That sounds like a minor thing to do, right? So I did provide 23 pages. I did provide everybody with a little cheat sheet, a color-coded cheat sheet that kind of says where we are in our strategic plan. This was a valuable exercise for our staff as well to see, you know, I was joking with Evan before the meeting started that so much of this plan got cratered by COVID. You know, we had these grand ideas that we had to kind of pause this one, pause that one, pause this one, pause that one. But it was gratifying to go through and see how much actually did happen.
Mm-hmm.
So at the risk of taking the rest of your lives, can I briefly go through and talk about each one of these color-coded things, Lisa, or do you have a preference for how we go forward?
Well, I know that everyone loves excruciatingly long meetings. So I really feel like maybe you should read, no, just kidding. Please proceed as you have suggested. I really appreciate the color. So thank you.
All right, it's Tony really who likes really long meetings.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Well documented. Okay, so green are objectives that are completed, yellow are the ones that we're working on, and red are the ones that we believe are no longer going to be, we're not going to do them basically. So there are several different goal levels. The first one is access and outreach, and I think this was the most objectives that we had was in this area. Definitely the push from this strategic plan was better access, better outreach. So the first one, fiscal year 20, the library board will annually compare service measures to those of state and national libraries using BiblioCommons data, metrics to include CERC programming and funding. So all of that data is available to us. Budgeting the last few years has been a little bit different because of COVID. Like going into fiscal year 21, Jmrl had a budget that was on its way to being accepted by all 5 jurisdictions. And then when COVID hit in March, we had to stop, go back and redo that document based on the concerns that every jurisdiction had about what kind of funding was going to be available the next year. So we actually took a slight reduction in the overall budget that year. And it worked out fine. You know, we kept all staff, but no staff got raises that year. And we didn't get to present these measures to our jurisdictions because there was not that much choice. At any rate, this is a valuable thing to do, and we have the tools to do it and can do so moving forward. Okay, Jmrl programming staff, we use output and outcome data to develop and sustain a range of accessible and representative programming on an annual basis. So this has happened. It doesn't mean that we're not still going to continue to do this in the future. You know, we have set up, I think, the tools in order to move forward and continue to do this. Number 3, we have evaluated partnership in the Department of Ed's summer food service program. So that kind of was on hold for all of last summer and 2020. But we have worked with individual programs to participate in the summer feeding programs. Most notably in Louisa, where they actually, a lot of our branches went to summer feeding sites and provided programming, and they actually also were a site at one point. Fiscal year 20, evaluate the benefits of creating institutional cards for community partners, such as schools, daycare centers, local nonprofits, homeschool cooperatives, community groups. So the customer service committee worked on this. Latasha is on the customer service committee as well. So I think that the end result was that there was a lot of discussion about this, and what came out of it was the teacher cards. And those got the top priority, basically, in getting their hands out there. Anything to add about institutional cards?
No, we do. We have been looking at things like homeschooling and other community groups. But right now, we're just trying to make sure the teacher cards get rolled out, and that we can manage any potential, ups and downs that may come with that, and then reevaluate other types of cards in the future.
What do you get with a teacher card? Do you get longer?
You get a longer checkout period, but with no renewals and no fine.
It's also available for teachers in our service area that don't necessarily live in our service area that otherwise would have to pay an out-of-area fee for access.
That's the plus. It's saying that if you educate our children, you are certainly worthy of having a card to assist in that. So.
Fiscal year 20, explore adding flexible non-registration programming and early literacy storytime classes at each location. So this is done. There was a request from the public basically to make sure that every branch had story time that was available that you didn't have to pre-register for, so you could come to, and every branch has done that. Of course, programming also, has been fits and starts, like right as we're getting ready for summertime and we're watching COVID numbers come back up again, that we're probably not going to be able to go full bore into all the indoor programming we would like to do. But if we are offering indoor programming, we're making sure that there's some non-registration available. Oh, skipped ahead to goal 4.
Woo,
It's one way to do it. Okay, a comprehensive review of the policy manual. This is in the works, has been in the works for a while. Policy committee's been working on this. What happened here really is and it gets rolled into another goal that is discussed later, is that what began as, okay, we want to take the policies that are important for the public and make sure those are public facing so that they know they can go to our website and see, here's what I need to know about using the library, and kind of extract the things that were more kind of nitty gritty for the board or for the staff to know. And what that ended up becoming is the employee handbook. That the decision was like a lot of these personnel policy things that were in there would better be served in their own location, and were moved into the employee handbook. So this is still ongoing, that we're still thinking about how best to present the policy manual. By the end of 21, develop a public engagement strategy that will give the entire community opportunities to learn more about library services and programming, including current non-users, explore ways to educate new area residents about Jmrl services. So we've had some turnover in our public engagement office, which is one person. It's a PR specialist working closely with myself and Krista and all of our department heads and departments. But we have yet to come up. My vision for this is that we would have a document of some sort saying, like, here's what's available and here's how we take advantage of that. And then also give tools to our staff at various locations that help them promote services in their own community as well. So it's one thing to say, like, here's all the Susan knows this better than anybody. Like when her patrons turn on the TV in Nelson, they get the Lynchburg news. They don't get the Charlottesville news. So when we get something covered in Charlottesville, or if we send the press in Charlottesville down to Nelson, the people who live there don't see it on their news. So she's done a great job of reaching out to the Lynchburg news, which is fantastic. But it's the type of thing that we should codify. Okay, by the end of 22, evaluate extension services region-wide. So we're talking about outreach services, and we've made some strides here. We are hiring a new bookmobile position that the board approved and is going to make it through the budgetary process, a part-time position. We're in the process of taking our bookmobile department and turning it into the bookmobile and outreach services department. So right now, the main thing that they do is drive the bookmobile around Charlottesville and Albemarle, because per the regional agreement, jurisdictions have to contract with Jmrl individually for bookmobile and extension services. So we're interested in offering to all 5 jurisdictions, here's real value in what we can bring to you without you having to build, for instance, a new library and a new population center. We can reach those folks in this way or that way, which could mean bookmobile service. It could also mean a lot of other outreach things like these holds lockers, holds pickup lockers, things like that. So part of this was to get some data. The question here was, okay, well, where are we not serving our own patrons? You know, there are 250-ish thousand people that live in our service area, and we have roughly 100,000 library cards. So, you know, the population is growing, and less than half of the people that live in our entire service region have cards. So where are they not using it? I've been working with the Weldon Cooper Center at the university to plot our user database against the latest census data. And they're pretty close to having some things to share there, some like heat maps basically of saying, here's where users are, here's where users aren't. And you can see some real population centers where there aren't library card users, specifically Zion's Crossroads area in Louisa. Like there are a ton of people that live there that aren't all library card users because maybe they're going to the Gordonsville Library. They're not coming into Charlottesville or over to Louisa. So long story short, we're working on this. And the second part of this is to come up with a plan to pitch to all 5 jurisdictions to say, here's the value that you could get. You know, you should consider this as something that you could pay into in order to provide better service to your community. I'll try to go faster. Evaluate methods to provide workforce development support to meet community needs. So we've been working on this hard in a lot of places. One of the experts is in the room here with me. Evan has worked with the Workforce Center to host multiple job fairs here at the Northside Library. Right now, Ophelia Payne in Louisa is working with the county and the Workforce Center and a few other folks, the Louisa Reentry Council, to try and there's no job center there, and people can't always travel into Charlottesville to try and partner with those folks to provide workforce development, especially as there's like an Amazon center moving into Louisa, and they're going to be hiring hundreds of people basically. So a lot of those people are going to need to apply for jobs that don't necessarily have email accounts and all that you need now. So the goal here, I think, was to determine whether or not there was a more a streamlined way we could do this, whether we would need to have our own department or whatnot. And it's been more organic than that, of course, broken up by the pandemic. And number 10, comprehensive policy and procedure review with the goal of removing barriers to library service. So looking for alternate secure ways to access library services and review of procedures that might prohibit account creation for juveniles. So I know that the Customer Service Committee has been talking about this, as well as the Circulation Committee, and that there are some ideas floating out there, including some things that I've heard that we haven't moved on yet are how to handle lost or damaged books for children. Anything to add on that? Okay. So we're thinking about it a little bit because they do see scenarios in which there's a lost or damaged book on a child's card, and it kind of prevents their using the library for years to come. So what are some things that we could do? Like, could we do some sort of like one get out of jail free card or something like that in order to allow access? By the end of fiscal year 23, develop a plan to enhance the role of Jmrl in early literacy development, academic achievement, the promotion of lifelong learning, network with local, state, and national organizations to foster literacy in the Jmrl service area. So Susan has maybe made the most gains here. Prior to the pandemic, she held a conference at the Nelson Library, bringing in all these sorts of stakeholders to talk about the problems with literacy, specifically in the county there. Susan, do you want to mention anything about, I know it's been a few years now, but anything about that? Are you still here?
Yes, what we did was we met with not only community stakeholders in the school system, but anyone who was interested. And we talked about literacy. We got some statistics from the school board about where our children were and some ideas about how we could reach out in the community to be able to help children with their early literacy in particular, to get them on ground and ready to go before they get to school.
One of the other outcomes here is the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program that Jmrl is offering now. But I don't consider this to be a completed goal because there's no written plan to deal with this on a regional basis or a statewide basis. By the end of 24, increase the number of active card users. So we've got some time on that. We're finishing 22 now. Same with the previous one, develop a plan to enhance the role. That's for next year. We should have a deliverable. So 24, I think, is closely related to the outreach that we were talking about there, this objective number 12. And one big change that has happened there was a pandemic silver lining, which was that you can get a virtual library card now at Jmrl from our website, which is something that the digital services coordinator at the time stood up in like 2 days, like March 18th, 2020 or something. We had something ready to go for that, which is extremely popular now. And by the end of 24, so again, a little bit forward, develop an institutional relationship with service area schools, allowing every enrolled child to have a library card before exiting the 4th grade. Identify gaps in services local school systems are able to provide and cooperate with schools to attempt to fill them. Coordinate with schools on summer reading challenges. So this is a long time goal, and we're working on some things that we'd like to pilot this with one of our jurisdictions, and we're working on an MOU now to bring to them that hopefully would get us started here and kind of prove concept to the rest of the school systems that we could do this.
Can I ask
Sure.
why you guys chose 5% growth for active card users? Was that just felt doable, but
I think
big enough?
Yeah, I think based on previous goals that we had, and some of these are based on the standards for excellence in public libraries that the state library uses. They removed a lot of the actual numerical benchmarks, but 5% was always one of them that they used if you were at the highest level. If you were at what they used to call, I think now it's called a AAA library, like you're one of the best libraries in the state, 5% growth was the benchmark. And similarly, within the next few years, formalize a partnership with UVA to share library resources. Possible projects include a local interlibrary loan, which is its own goal, and going the other way, delivering Jmrl holds to the university community so that the kids could place holds on Jmrl books and pick them up there, and making cards off-site for them as well. So the first part of this, we have currently a local interlibrary loan, which is great. The rest of it still needs work.
How about returning books to JMRL, UVA library books that I mistakenly put in the JMRL drop? How can we get that fixed?
Actually, we have a solution for that, Tony, and have for years. Leo comes to Gordon Avenue and picks them up. They come once a week. We send books that get returned because that happens on a regular basis. We also have
right. Yes.
I think it should be called the Tony Clause, and I'm here for it.
Okay.
It's already in the works.
Same for our school libraries. If kids return Charlottesville City School library books, they come to Central and they go to me, and I give them to my wife who works in the schools, and she returns them. And if they're county books, somebody drops them off at the county. And I'm sure, Susan, when you have Nelson County books, you return them to the schools there. So it just takes a little while, Tony.
Okay.
Eventually they make their way.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Are they marked late, or do you have a note in there as to when it was?
That's up to the schools. Right, that's up to them. Each branch manager is working on a neighborhood-specific community action plan. So it's kind of a smaller version of this plan for their specific branch. It's in 2 parts. What are the physical needs of your building? Like what do we need to do for your building? And then what are the services that we need to provide for our community here in Green or in Louisa or in Nelson or the Gordon Avenue community or okay.
I'm sorry.
Hey, David, you dropped out there for about 15 seconds.
Is that what you were going to say too, Lisa?
Yes, I couldn't hear. I didn't know if you were speaking to us or if you were listening to someone in the room speak.
No, I was talking to you all. So what I was saying is that each branch manager has a goal to create this neighborhood-specific strategic plan for their location. So it's to deal with the building itself, like what are the needs of our building? So for instance, Susan, not too much to do for the needs of her brand new building there, But there are other things such as how to provide service to our community when we're looking at outreach services and things like that.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, second one is technology. Guess what? We're all done with that. We can move right along.
3.
Third one is staffing. Okay, so the very first goal is annually Jmrl will review compression needs and apply Albemarle County's algorithm to pay increases as funding allows. So when this plan was written, Jmrl was in the middle of a 3-year plan to address compression, which was supported by all 5 jurisdictions and was completed in fiscal year 21. So since then, the priority has shifted. Board's priority has shifted. The world has shifted a little bit. And what has happened instead is that the priority has moved to a $15 minimum wage, which I'm very happy to say we're going to start in July of this year. Everybody under $17 at Jmrl is going to be moved up relative to their position with each other. So that has been the focus of Jmrl since then, rather than annually looking at compression, because what that did is it moved the whole pay scale. So all of a sudden, what was compression that was fixed is now compression at the very beginning again. So really, what is needed is an entire new compression study. What we're going to get is a pay review, a salary study. We're working with the city of Charlottesville on that, and they're starting now, basically. So hopefully, by the end, they say 9 months, which they think this year, November, December. It's going to be rough to get that into Jmrl's fiscal year 23 budgeting, but it depends on the timing of it. But over the next few years, the spirit of this goal will be met by a new salary study, which I'm sure is going to tell us these bands and stages are not where they should be. Here's where they should be. And then we need to work on a way to get where we need to be with our jurisdictions. So that means the thought at the time was that every year we would look at individual positions and figure out like where are they and what do they need in order to get ahead of compression. But instead, it's going to be another start over for everybody. Thomas said his internet went out, Lisa, so he had to drop off. Not intentionally. Okay, library trustees will annually seek continuing ed and networking opportunities, focusing on advocacy for increased financial support. Jmrl will work with the Library of Virginia and VLA to attempt to create training networking opportunities for public library trustees across the state. So former trustee Erica Younglove and I had a meeting with the head of the Virginia Library Association and the head of the Library of Virginia Networking and Development Division on March 14th, 2020 to discuss putting together a conference track for trustees that would specifically be Jmrl being a leader here and like how are we going to train our trustees to advocate for better funding for library services. And then COVID hit and you know the annual conference became there was none that year, and then it was digital, and then last year was the first full in-person one. So there's still work to be done here. Number 3, completed, craft a customer service statement, form a customer service committee. So that's done. The full board saw the customer service statement that Brittany and Natasha and that crew came up with. Number 4, evaluate the need for a separate staff personnel manual, and that's the employee handbook that we ended up with, which also came out of the policy committee review. 21, assess current training needs, update the staff training plans, ensuring that a curriculum exists for listed offerings. That's done. It's undergoing revision again as we speak. And the big thing that came out of this was the creation of a training committee. So we now have a dedicated group that meets regularly to make sure that this plan is kept up to date. Okay, by the end of fiscal year 21, assess needs at each branch for adding staff to provide additional evening and weekend hours in response to community feedback gathered for this strategic plan. Develop a plan to provide staffing for additional open hours suggested by this assessment. So this is another one that the budget that we were presenting in spring of 2020 included additional hours for the Northside Library that then we lost because of funding that year. You know, they weren't going to fund additional hours, and then we're back up to full hours and have been for a long time now, but we're not having discussions with our jurisdictions right now about adding hours currently. I don't think anyone on the public side, the staff side, the board side, or our jurisdictional partners are looking to add more hours right this second. I'm sure they will be soon, but not right now. Okay, by the end of 21, develop systems to encourage innovation from staff, give staff tools to suggest process improvements, best practices, new services, untapped resources, provide an avenue to receive feedback. So we do have a feedback method there. We have a form basically for staff to fill out with all these things, but it's not, and it does get used. I get suggestions and we do implement those, but it's not quite, I think, at the scale that that the 5-year plan committee was thinking about when this came up. So there's work to be done here. By the end of 22, develop a diversity plan in consultation with the city of Charlottesville following ALA guidelines. I've been saying this now for 6 weeks, but the bones of this are done. The equity committee has been working on this, and it's 75% written, 100% mapped out. And once it's done, we'll bring it to the full board for review. Secure funding by the end of fiscal year 22 to support library service hours to meet the state AA benchmarks. That's what I was talking about. That's the middle of the three. And both of those are done. So it's 60 hours per week at Northside, 48 at Louisa. Is that correct? 60 hours? Somebody would have to count. But Louisa, I know, is at 48. By the end of 23, Jmrl staff will perform a comprehensive review of the pay scale with data from peer libraries. So that's ongoing, and 23 is about the right timeline for that. Objective 10. Staff cross-training plan starts July 1. So that same training committee, there's a subcommittee there spearheaded by Susan, who's done a wonderful job coming up with it's a logistical nightmare. It's the size of the state of Delaware. Jmrl is physically. There's 125 employees. Some branches have, 2 full-time employees. Some have 40. But the plan is in place, and starting in July, everybody is going to have a requirement every year to go work at a circulation desk at either if they don't work in circulation, it's going to be circulation potentially at their branch, or move to another branch and see how things are run there. We're really excited about this, just the chance for cross-pollination, to get good ideas about different ways to deal with some similar issues. And during the pandemic, I think everybody has had to cross-train on the fly, so it's going to be good to have a system in place. Review Jmrl's employee assessment period by the end of 23. I'm very interested in this, and we'll be working with the city of Charlottesville on this. I think they're going to be working on theirs as well. I have heard that they have hired a head of HR. They haven't had one for a while, but they're expecting somebody starting by the end of this month. And one of their goals is to look at an employee assessment. And by the end of fiscal year 24, Jmrl staffing will meet or exceed standard of 0.5 FTE per 1,000 people. I forgot to do the math on this, which we did last year during the review, but we weren't there. We haven't substantially added staff in the last few years, though. We have made some gains, a new full-time employee at the Nelson County Library, thanks to the support of Nelson County. That was much needed for a long time. Converting some temporary substitute hours at the Scottsville Library into part-time positions. But I think we're under where we need to be here.
So do we have just an A rating? Is what you're trying to say?
Yes. Although I believe they removed this metric since we wrote this.
That's what happens when you write it.
The problem is that across the state, it's like apples to oranges in so many places, where you have tiny libraries serving a very small rural population in a single jurisdiction, being held to the same standard as Alexandria Public Library and Jmrl and things like that. So they ended up deciding that a lot of those metrics needed to be removed. Okay, collection. Explore ways to enhance and ensure stability for collection funding, including advocacy for state level support, encouraging local support, inspiring private sources for gifts, seek to attain a AA level of collection funding, meaning at least 15% of the library's annual operating budget will be allocated for the purchase of materials for the collection. So there have been some very big gains here in the past few years on the state level. The State support has increased. It's still at about, I think it's under 65% of what the funding formula says that it should be. Jmrl has, we're active on the legislative committee of the Virginia Library Association. We have helped to advocate for this with our local elected officials. You know, I've met with many of them. We have asked our supporters to write letters of support to many of them. And that's been good, but we have very little control over that, over what the state is going to do with the budget, especially right now. So encouraging local support and inspiring private sources for gifts. We've made some headway here tied to specific projects, such as the Grow Nelson Library project. When the Nelson Library expanded, Susan and a group of volunteers worked very hard to fundraise. That fundraising now means that for the next few years, they have funding available for books and materials for the Nelson Library, which helps Jmrl as a whole because they're available for everyone to check out, but also helps keep their collection fresh. And I also am planning to speak to this year the Friends of the Library Foundation Advisory Committee. Last year we had discussed annually setting aside funding to support the collection, and agreed that this year I would come back with a proposal for that. So headway is being made here, but there's always room for improvement. Annually purchasing materials in support of the standards of learning. So I know Angela and Tim have been working on that. As physical facilities grow and change, plan for concomitant changing collection needs. For example, support the expansion of Nelson Library with expanded collection support. So that happened thanks largely to that fundraising. There was an opening day collection there that Jmrl was able to support, both in the ordering and processing, and then also I think in some of the unpacking, but mostly it was Susan and her crew with some help from tech services that got it all on the shelf. In fiscal year 20, develop and implement a sustainable plan for offering circulating digital media such as film and music through the e-library. So that's done. The platform is called Canopy. Also in 20, update and revise the collection management plan. Meredith, are you here? Do you want Meredith Dickens? Do you want to talk about where we are on that process now?
Yeah, we do still expect it to be revised, just as it, like everything else. In fiscal year 2020, we faced an evolution of services and staffing and workflows because of COVID, and it changed our priorities. So I sort of put a pause on that, but looking forward to revising it, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year.
Thank you. And it's still it's a very solid plan as is. I mean, it needs tweaking, but we use it daily. What was the phrase you used? That was great, about how we had to change services.
Evolve.
Yeah, it was flowerier than that. But.
Oh yeah.
Okay, objective 6, using benchmarks from fiscal year 17 and collection data gathered biannually since, evaluate foreign language and English as a second language learning materials available with respect to community needs, plan for growth or determine. So we're still working on this. We've had some discussions about this. We're hoping to use some of the data that we're working with Weldon Cooper on too, to help identify the needs there. Yeah, so a lot of work to be done here. I know we're also talking about not just collection services for folks that are non-native English speakers. This is specifically in the collection portion of this, but I think as we think about the future, we need to be broader in terms of what kind of support we can give. Number 7, assess current ILL, explore eliminating the fee for this, combining requests for materials purchase with those for materials lending, seek to formalize a lending partnership with UVA libraries. So the second half of that is done. The first half is not. We haven't discussed eliminating the fee for the service in a while. It also, interlibrary loan services was shut down for quite a bit in the beginning of COVID. Lending institutions weren't lending, so we weren't requesting these things from anyone. And I don't know where we are on the combining requests for materials purchase. I know that those two things work together, streamlined. You know, we're looking at the same department is basically looking at requests to buy new things. Actually, it's two different departments. I'm sorry. Meredith and Sierra are looking at requests to buy new things, and then reference in each branch is seeing all the interlibrary loan requests. So ideally, we would have kind of one form that would go in, and we'd make a decision about should we buy it or should we borrow it. But that's going to take some time. By the end of 23, explore and evaluate alternative pricing and licensing models in the digital marketplace. For example, cost per use versus simultaneous access licensing. I think the market has shifted some, and we have less say over this than we have had in the past, which is why I'm not sure that this is a goal that we're going to be able to complete. Meredith, anything to say on that?
No, that's exactly right. We basically for much of the content, we're only offered one option. If we want to license it, we pay for it in this way. So, and it's constantly evolving, but we're at the mercy of the publishers and the content providers. There's that word again, Lisa, content. But yeah, so we don't. You're exactly right. It's a little obsolete right now.
Okay. Finance. Secure the AA service rating as defined by LVA.
I had a question.
Please.
Back to number, it was going back to objective 1 in the previous section. It was just a question about, I know we've received some comments a while ago about the musty, the idea, like, I guess I was thinking about this in the context of the new gubernatorial administration and the way that they're working to ban books at both school and public libraries. And I know that at Jmrl that we have some pretty firm policies. You know, I think we have some pretty firm policies, but I didn't know if, as you're starting to think, are you following the guidance of the VLA? Because I think that they also have been, I think, pretty robust. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought they've been pretty robust in not capitulating to want to ban books in just for the reasons that the current governor is interested in, like stopping the teaching of diverse, what's the word? Divisive concepts. And I didn't know if that was something that needs to be reflected or was reflected. I don't know. That was just, I think I just would love to hear more information. Maybe there's not been any incursions, and so I don't have anything to worry about, but that is something I am concerned about.
Yeah, Jmrl has seen an increase in requests for consideration but not, over the last 5 to 10 years, really. And worked on our request for reconsideration policies pretty thoroughly a few years ago. Did something that I love, which was broaden them to include not just books, but all services provided by Jmrl. So now there's a one-stop form for people that have a problem with or would like us to reconsider a program, a display, a book, an ebook, things like that. So we have not had to tweak that policy. It serves us well. It's very clear and laid out, and it basically starts with staff. A request for reconsideration comes in. Usually it happens with frontline staff. Somebody will come up to somebody at a service desk and say, I have a problem with this book. I don't think it should be here. I think it should be there. And the frontline staff has clear-cut procedures that say, listen, acknowledge, and then offer the services that, offer the forms that we have and the policy. After that, it goes to the person in charge regionally of that. So it either goes to Meredith, if it's adult content or adult books mostly, or materials, or Angela for children's, Tim for young adult. Or if it's an adult programming, it goes to the head of our reference services. They will take some time to review. There's a thorough review process. I think it's a 30-day period. We respond right away and say, we're going to take 30 days to review this. We'll work with our peers. So sometimes that involves calling other libraries or calling the Virginia Library Association and prepare a written response to the patron that has a decision that says, here's what we're going to do. We're either going to leave it where it is, or we're going to move it over here, or we're not going to do, we're going to remove it, whatever the decision is. And then if the patron is unhappy with that, the next step is that they can take it to myself for a review. I'll set up a meeting with them and with the head of that division, and we'll discuss. And I'll give my review, my ruling on what should happen there. If they're unhappy with that, then it will come to the library board. So we have had.
Has it ever happened? Have you ever had to sit down over pie with someone who didn't like a book?
That has not, we have not had any official request for reconsideration reach that level or reach the board level in the time that I've been the director here. I can't speak for it, but in my 20 years at Jmrl, I can't remember that.
Okay.
The problem, Lisa, is that having that well thought out, carefully crafted policy in place does not necessarily mean that folks in the outside the library world are going to follow that, right? So what happens is that you hear complaints that go, instead of through the proper procedures, they'll come straight to me, or they'll go to the local governing body, or they'll go to somebody will write their state senator to complain about something that's happening there.
Yes.
So then we kind of have to refocus them back to like, okay, I understand you're not happy about this. Here is our policy and procedure, and we have to follow it the same way every time. So we have not changed anything in the last few years, although it's in the news a lot about reconsideration and the role of public libraries. You're right in that the Virginia Library Association has been very involved in advocating and writing, reaching out to either groups of elected officials or individuals to say like, hey, we have to respect the freedom to read, and here are our professional ethics, and here's why it's important that libraries can offer a wide variety of materials. But was there a specific objective here that you thought that kind of touched on that?
No, not really, not at all. I think what I was doing was thinking about this in the context of the research you had Weldon Cooper doing. And so I was just thinking like, I was just like, yeah, they do have like so much data that they harness. I wonder if that could be helpful, but there's no need to solve for a problem we don't have. We already have the procedures that are in place. If the line gets jumped somewhere, you can kind of go back to the start and, follow the procedure that we have. So I'm not trying to make any additional work. I was just really curious, and I'm glad I asked because you had an excellent answer, as I knew you would.
Yeah, I think that Jmrl was ahead of the curve on this. We rewrote those, I think, 4 years ago, kind of, and made sure that they were sound, and now we're ready for them. And we do have challenges. We have current challenges out there, but it's not unusual for public libraries to get challenges about materials from all across the spectrum.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, finance. Jmrl will work with VLA, the Friends, and local jurisdictions to increase state aid to 100% of the amount mandated by state code. So this is pretty similar to the other goal. The other goal, I think, more leaned towards, okay, if we can't get state aid to 100%, where else are we going to get funding in order to pay for materials? So same thing. We've made some progress there, but it's an ongoing goal. The library board, led by trustees from Green, Louisa, and Nelson, encouraged Jmrl's jurisdictions to attain AA funding standard, which says that the library shall receive no less than 1% of the total revenue of its local government. So work with those jurisdictions to come up with a roadmap for how to get there and what kind of services those would provide when we get there. So still a work in progress. Jmrl's budgeting process will annually utilize goals and objectives from jurisdictional strategic plans and prioritizing and presenting budget objectives. This is something that we have done. We started looking at the planning for all 5 jurisdictions and making sure that Jmrl's plans are in line with what the plans of the community, the jurisdiction are, so we can say to them, like, here's what you're trying to do. Here's how the library fits in with that. In 21, explore alternatives to the current out-of-area fee that jurisdictions charge to non-residents. So broach this annually with our jurisdictions. There are still several that view this as a revenue resource that they are not willing to get rid of at this time. So we will continue working with them on that. In 21, develop and implement a fundraising plan and annual calendar. So this needs a lot of work. I think at one point there was a development position that was being discussed that got moved around, it ended up not making the plan. But the idea is to come up with an overall plan for fundraising and support and have annual events for that. Of course, we work very closely with our friends, the Friends of the Library, and they have their annual events, which are incredibly successful and provide the resources that allow us to do all of our programming at the library. Okay, the next one we actually do have a suggestion for. Fiscal year 22, so that's right now. This means in the next few weeks, and it's not going to happen. As you can see, it's a yellow goal. Run fiscal analysis to determine the impact of a fine-free library. Findings will be reported to the library board. So I'm sure everyone here is aware that there's a big movement to remove library fines, that the American Library Association came out and said that they were in fact not equitable, and also not not successful in what they're intended to do, which is to get materials back on time. Many of our peers have moved away from fines. The entire Valley Library system, so Stanton, Waynesboro, Augusta no longer has fines. I believe Richmond's moving away from fines. Most of the larger libraries across the country, the real leaders, are fine-free at this point. Jmrl is constructed differently than these single jurisdiction libraries where, as part of the regional agreement, we rely on fines and fees for equipment. The money that comes in from fines and fees pays for the actual equipment that the library uses. So jurisdictions pay for buildings, they pay for personnel, they pay for the lights. The state aid pays for the books and materials. Fines and fees pay for this table and the computers that we need, those types of things. So we can't just turn it off. I need to have something else there. So AJ and I have been talking about this for a while. And thank you, AJ, for coming up with some proposed wording here. One of the problems is that we have a lack of data here on what the impact would be, which is basically that right now, the reports that we get in from various different cash collecting areas there don't always entirely separate out what is fines and fees versus what is other revenue coming in. So we don't have a correct picture here. We need to get that correct picture. So the proposed goal is that this upcoming fiscal year, we would restructure our deposit transmittal forms and procedures to isolate revenue received exclusively from fines. So that doesn't include like replacement materials, that's a separate thing. And then the next year, run this fiscal analysis to determine the impact of a fine-free library, findings reported to the library board. So we kind of need to get some data here before we can come up with a plan. That plan is going to have to include some way to replace that revenue, though, because we're still going to need tables and computers and things like that. One thing I will mention is that we do have some data for a fine-free year. Starting in, well, if you look at all of fiscal year 21, there were no library fines, but there were also very limited library services. We had buildings closed, and we had appointment services, and then we had limited access to the buildings for part of that time. So it's hard to separate, well, what of that is COVID services and what of that is a fine-free library. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on that methodology?
Thank you so much. I'm glad that it's going to be that they'll do a study on it, because I'm really interested in the purpose of fines are to make sure you get the books back in time. But if you end up relying on your budget on a significant amount of fines, then you really need people to not turn books in on time so you can fill those. I just want to say my spouse made me feel very bad whenever I had to pay a library fine. And now I feel like I have been doing a good thing all along. And be rewarded and encouraged for paying my library fines.
Do you think that we, Pearl, were you trying to say something? It looked like you were talking.
No, I was just basically what Lisa said, that I just think it's seems to make so much sense just to kind of study this for a while and see what comes up. But yeah, and I was thinking about when, during COVID, if that was instructive at all, but you answered that as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, we know what the revenue for that year was, but it's hard to take that as a solid data point and say that's what it's like if you don't have fines and fees.
Right.
So do you think that this group would be willing to recommend this change to, so this is objective number 6 under goal number 5?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was.
Yes, I hear Meredith Cole says yes.
I think it's a great idea to study it. I'm really curious about how all these jurisdictions have managed to go fine-free and people bring the books back and they're still making money. It's like someone needs to tell that to Spirit Airlines, because Spirit Airlines will charge you for bringing your own food on the plane. So.
It largely has to do with how they're constructed, Lisa. So if you're a single jurisdiction library, the money doesn't necessarily come back to the library, it goes back to the jurisdiction. So if you're Fairfax County's library and you're just a department like Parks and Rec or like something else, the revenue that they come in goes to the general fund of the library doesn't keep it. It goes back to the jurisdiction. Whereas the way Jmrl is constructed, that money comes back to Jmrl.
I see. Thank you. I don't know if Tony had something as well.
Tony?
No, I think it's a great idea. And yeah, obviously, if we, spend some time studying it and take a survey of how it's being done all across the nation, I'm sure we can come up with something. But it's another one of those things that, yeah, it's historical and seems archaic now, but we need the money. So,
yeah. And we've heard some, Jmrl doesn't charge overdue fines for juvenile cards anymore. And the expectation was that would be about a 15% drop in revenue for the equipment fund there. And that's about what it tracked at. It was about a 15% loss. And I know some other libraries have also stepped this in and been like, no fines for seniors, no fines for teachers, which were already kind of have offered that as well. So there are intermediary steps too that could be discussed. All right, getting to the end here. Facilities. Work with Nelson County to implement an expansion of the Nelson Memorial Library. I am very pleased to say that this is done. Objective number 2, create a work group of trustees, friends, community members, Charlottesville and Albemarle staff to plan and advocate for the renovation of the central library. So I've talked to the friends about this. Pearl was there when I mentioned this. I have talked to the county, I've talked to the city, largely staff, but also elected officials there. We have not yet put this working group together because the feedback that I'm receiving is that the capital expenses there, especially on the city's end, are going to have to be behind the school reconfiguration process, which has been much in the news in the last year or so, basically. But that's the priority for the city of Charlottesville. They understand that they have a resource. It's co-owned, the Central Library, by Charlottesville and Albemarle, so it has to be both jurisdictions agreeing to it. The price tag is around $13 million and, grows. We haven't looked at it with inflation for this year. Every year construction costs go up. It would be a boon to the people of Charlottesville, Albemarle, and really the whole system. It would also be a huge thing. We've got 50 people working in there that we would need to move out to another location during the project. So the work group would be able to look at a lot of those things, even if it wasn't specifically like we have a plan to fund this right now. But we're talking to the jurisdictions about fundraising and what could we bring to the table. I know the Friends are very interested. The Friends Endowment Committee talks about this as well, that there's funding there that we could start with to say like, hey, the library can be a partner in this, if not an equal partner, then at least bring some money to the table, and we've seen that work successfully. But this working group does not exist as of yet because there's little movement in the capital, the CIP plan, especially on the city's end.
Should we change the fiscal year date on that, or you just think?
Sure, yeah, if the group would like to do that. I mean, I didn't go through all of them and change the fiscal years of the ones that we're still working on.
Right. Or do you just feel like we're kicking it 3 years ahead of time and we're not?
I think that putting a date on it at this point is, it's not going to happen until they're ready for it to happen, basically. And our timeline for that is not going to be the priority. There. It doesn't mean that it's not a priority for the city and the county. It's just they have a lot of priorities. And it's slotted not at the top. So we could certainly do that. And
for a working group.
Yeah, putting a working group together, I think is not.
Because it sounded like the working group would have other.
Yeah, we could talk about other things. We could brainstorm. I think the goal here was meant to get some of the parties in a room together to start talking, especially staff on both the cities and the counties end. So is there any interest in changing the Meredith's suggestion? Keeping this, but keeping some immediacy to it. Saying that we want to do this by next year.
Yep, I like that idea.
Yes.
I agree.
Next year's fiscal year. So that was in fiscal year 21. This would be in fiscal year 22.
Are you going to change the other dates? Is that an idea if things are in process? Just to keep yourself, I guess, accountable. Are you guys accountable to, or what's going to be the priorities? I mean,
I hadn't been planning on it, but that's certainly something we could do.
I mean, I'm not suggesting we sit here for another hour and change every day, but I'm just curious. you know, somebody went to a lot of work, probably you, to figure out when you wanted to accomplish all the objectives and COVID knocked you off.
Knock everything off, right?
So then the question is, did it just get shifted or?
I think my assumption was that most of these that we identified as we're still working on these, that we would continue to work on them through the life of this plan, which is through the next 2 years, basically. And really, this group, starting next year, is gonna have to start thinking about the next strategic plan, and then it would be like, what do we need to carry over?
What's still gonna,
Yeah.
what's not gonna still be done,
Yeah,
and
what's
it's
not
still
gonna be done.
important. Okay. Got
But
it.
I'm happy to do that, though, if you think it would be a useful
No,
exercise.
no, I'm just curious about staff, what they would think. I mean, it's up to you guys.
I think my goal was always that this would be a living and breathing document, that it wouldn't be like, okay, it sits here and then 5 years later you write a different one, you know? So there could be some value to that. It would mean some work time for this body.
I would also be curious if you're gonna shift, like you did the technology plan, some of the nitty gritty off
Yeah.
of the board coded part. Like, do we need to know how you're gonna make the sausage, or do we just
Yeah.
wanna know that there's gonna be
I
sausage?
think that's maybe a lesson learned for the next.
It's a lot of detail.
It's a lot of detail, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it's bad. I just think maybe you guys wanna save yourself some
Yeah,
grief.
I agree with that, but I don't think there's any reason to go back now
No.
and do that. The
Okay.
technology one I thought was pretty clearly, that was a good place to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Let's stick with that one, and then if the full board has any feedback on that. we
I
can
just
go
think
back.
that one's gonna get lost because I think right now we're feeling a little dismayed
Yeah.
by the priorities that have
I
been
think
forced
there's some
upon us.
movement, though. I think that there's some positive movement. I think that there are community members interested in this project. I know that we've got friends interested. You know, we've got elected officials that think it's a great idea. It's just a matter of trying to line it up.
I mean, I have a child in the Charlottesville City Schools, so I'm not crying over the final renovation. But
Yeah, I mean, it's not that, there's nobody saying, I think that's a bad idea, we shouldn't do that.
they're just saying, really can't do anything else.
Yes, we have a lot of priorities.
Yes, exactly.
I will say from experience, sometimes a project like a renovation will come off the docket like as a focus. And all of a sudden, someone in city planning or something, like something flips around and they're like, oh, what if we approach it from this direction? So it's not a bad idea having a working group, just so you're not
Ready.
caught by surprise of, okay, now we have to hurry up
And
and.
I would love to see also what the plans are, because it might be good to have sort of a 3-tier plan, which is one is like, what do we actually need to do to make it so that, I don't know, the roof doesn't come in. I'm just making something up. And then the second one is, yeah,
And
completely.
then there's the dream scenario.
The dream scenario. We take up the entire block.
Director's helipad.
Lions.
To Latasha's point, we saw that happen, you know, with this building here, where it was the Crozet Library was slated, the county was talking about building a new Crozet Library, and that was a decade-long process to get from like, hey, we need this thing, to, okay, we're building this thing. But with the Northside Library, which was a rented space, it was a moment of opportunity, you know, where the county saw that they were going to lose some storage space. This building was available. They could put their storage and the new library here. And that happened, you know, in under 2 years. It was just boom. So yeah, having some ideas already in place would be useful.
Don't miss that opportunity. And,
Now, we did talk to the city about, well, what's the value in having shovel-ready architectural plans? We've got design plans now, you know, that say, here's the types of features that we would need in a new library. That's the central library. The shovel-ready plans, though, would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, in 6 figures easy, and they would be outdated within a few years. So unless you have some sort of guarantee that the project is going to happen, the advice we got was it's not worth it to spend. It's not worth it to go to the friends and say, hey, can we have $250,000 for this architecturally ready plan, unless we believe that it's absolutely going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. So. Okay. We're still working on an inventory of signage and a signage plan to standardize. Made a lot of strides here in the last few years to kind of get I'm going to guess that Lisa's second favorite word behind content is brand, but to try to get try to get the brand on point so that, you know, when we have different signage at different places, patrons could recognize like, oh, this is a message from the library, you know. But this inventory and plan has not happened. By the end of 23, establish plans and a timeline to create a drive-through book return. So that's next year, and we're working with the city on this. This they consider a small, I'm sorry, this is at Gordon Avenue. They consider a small cap project. I'm not sure whether or not this can actually happen. The branch manager and myself are meeting with an architect next week because the city and the county do have some resources in the next few years to do this. But now that we have seen the work that's required by Latasha and her staff to manage a drive up here, the concept of, it'll be like a service station, you know, a bell will ring and then you can run from the front and go give service. You need space for a staff member. You need, you need more room than they might have, basically, and more staff. So we're going to look at what it would take physically for the building, but it also might involve more operational costs that the city and the county may or may not support.
Could just be a slot.
It could be like a slide. So for next year, a parking study for each location. There is really not a single location except maybe Louisa, potentially Green. It doesn't have some sort of parking issue, even the ones that have ample parking. So we're interested in coming up with some kind of comprehensive, like, okay, what are the needs at each location when it comes to parking? And what are some potential solutions? So these, now we're moving into future ones. Work with Albemarle County to talk about the plan for a Southern Urban Area Library. So this is something that we've talked with them about for years. When I began as director in 2018, there was a group of citizens on the Southern urban tip. You know, they were Albemarle citizens that lived on the south end of Charlottesville that were very interested in library service in that area. They talked to the county about it. They talked about the potential for a co-use building with Piedmont. So it would be a library for both PVCC and a public library. They talked about renting retail space out, much like Northside did before moving into this building. And they talked about using county land to build a new library. The county was not ready to jump at that point. There's been a lot of growth on the southern end of town, though, so I believe that this will probably come up again. The county's previous comprehensive plan included library requests for library service in the Pantops area, which is not exactly the same thing, you know, but also a lot of growth there. So we'll need to work with the county to determine, you know, what their capacity is here and what their needs are. But eventually, I believe that'll be the need. There'll have to be something. I think, to me, what makes the most sense is if there's empty retail space there, to have a storefront library that we rent for a few years to kind of prove the need for, much like Northside, we rented for 20 years for a new building, you know, a few. And the last objective is related to each branch manager, and AJ and myself are working on an individualized plan to detail the physical needs of their facility. So there's two ends of this. There's the physical needs, and then there's the service. Okay. Shoo, that was a lot of me talking.
You guys were busy.
All right, so I think our takeaways, what I heard is that we will recommend to the board that we replace the technology plan with the board technology plan with what the board technology committee recommended. That we would change the wording on the fine-free library to allow for a year to get our house in order for collection of data, and that we would change we would just move by one the year for the working group to get together. But there was a lot of stuff there, and it's all on the table. So we're in no real, we have a goal to every year to review this. And now that we're asking the board to make changes, we will ask them to vote on that. But that doesn't mean that we can't change other things. So if you have feedback on anything else that you heard today, even if it doesn't occur to you right this second, we can certainly talk about that. I say offline, but it's not offline. It would be via email or things like that. But any other thoughts or feedback?
I just want to thank the committee that has been involved in building this all out. I know it's a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. So thanks very much to everybody, all the staff and my colleagues on the board for their work, as well as for the friends of the library, the friends. This is my crown here. I thank you. Thank you all so much for all that you do. It's really amazing to see the behind the scenes of what it takes. As a patron, like I never knew any of this was going on except for the book sale. So the idea that there's so much labor that goes in and so much creativity. Thank you all.
David, I think the strategic plan is, I got to say, exciting. There's some stuff in there I know that's been in there for ages, and I remember it well from my previous tenure, but I got to say, it's an exciting document because there's some stuff in there that's really forward-looking. So I'm very, very pleased with it.
Yeah, and we're coming towards we're over the halfway point in this plan. So as I mentioned, it's going to be time for this group or some iteration of this group. Probably the bulk of the work will be done in fiscal year 24. So starting like around a year from now. But next year we should start thinking about like, hey, what's the process going to be like? What do we want? You know, in the past we have done large community surveys, or we have worked with outside groups, or you know, how do we want to move forward in it? So I think our next meeting, you know, what I would like to do maybe is get together in the fall and start to brainstorm a little bit, like, hey, how do we want to approach the next plan? And then next spring we'll do another review of where we are in this plan, but then start kicking off a real like, hey, we need to write a whole new thing.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, well, Lisa, I'll be in touch about, you know, presenting this information to the full board, and then likely they'll want to hear about it this month, and then they can vote to adopt changes in June.
That sounds great. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you very much. This was very well organized, very clear. I appreciate it. And it's really nice to meet everybody. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Lisa, for having us.
Thank you, David.
Bye, everyone. Bye, all. Susan, see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thanks.
Nope.
Did it get cut off?